Brightline's Miami-Orlando corridor reset expectations for higher-speed intercity rail in 2023. Stuart and Cocoa were named as the next candidate stations, but where do they stand in 2025? In today's Great Trainspeed, we pulled meeting notes, filings, and public presentations. Come with Great Trainspeed as we connect the dots on what's advancing, what's stalled, and what's next on the critical path. Brightline's high-speed line along Florida's East Coast has shifted from ambitious idea to everyday utility. Since Miami-Orlando entered steady operations in 2023, the corridor has shown that modern intercity rail can thrive in the U.S., pairing frequent departures with comfortable rolling stock and reliable travel times. Let's recall the trajectory. After launch, demand built quickly. By the end of 2023, Brightline had carried more than 5 million passengers. With Orlando running a full calendar year in 2024, the system settled into a higher baseline, turning early curiosity into repeat trips. Moving into 2025, the trend remains upward and steady. In the first 7 months alone, Brightline recorded more than 1.8 million riders. March posted a peak at 280,003 passengers, while typical months held in a dependable approximately 240,000 to 260,000 range. July reached over 255,000, about 16% higher than the same month last year, pointing to a pattern we see on mature high-speed lines worldwide. Once travelers trust the schedule and the onboard experience, ridership compounds as business, leisure, and airport-bound trips all converge. In short, the service is no longer novel, it's becoming a habit. Today's station spine, Miami, Aventura, Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, and Orlando, anchors the corridor at logical hubs for tourism, employment, and regional connections. To keep pace with demand, Brightline plans to lengthen consists, adding capacity without rewriting the timetable. That choice matters. Longer trains protect dwell times, keep platform operations simple, and allow the service plan to scale while preserving a predictable clock face schedule that riders can memorize. What's next is network completeness. Proposed stations at Stuart and Cocoa would close the largest gaps on the Treasure Coast and Space Coast, giving residents shorter drives to the platform and visitors a rail-first option to beaches, town centers, and regional attractions. The benefits are practical and near-term: easier first-last mile links, more even spacing between stops, and stronger all-day demand that supports higher train utilization. Over time, these infill stations can catalyze local Main Street upgrades, new hospitality offerings, and small business growth around the station, exactly the kind of place-based development that successful high-speed corridors tend to unlock. Zooming out, Brightline now sits in the same conversation as established international corridors, where frequency, consistency, and station placement do the heavy lifting. The playbook is familiar: keep the timetable reliable, right-size the rolling stock, and stitch in the missing links so the map feels continuous. If you want to know more, we can walk through how Stuart and Cocoa would affect end-to-end times, turnback logistics, and daily frequencies, and compare Brightline's growth curve with peer corridors abroad to see what kind of ridership ceiling Florida might realistically reach in the next few years. Ready to explore Brightline's 2 upcoming stations? If this topic grabs you, hit the subscribe button to Great Trainspeed for daily rail updates. Let's dive into Stop 1. Stuart is shaping up as a key infill on Brightline's high-speed line along Florida's East Coast. The proposed site is situated on the Treasure Coast, roughly 40 miles north of West Palm Beach, and within easy reach of I-95 and Florida's Turnpike. As the lone stop on the long stretch between West Palm Beach and Orlando, it would give the Treasure Coast a direct rail link to the region's modern intercity network and shorten first-last mile trips for locals and visitors. The near-term hurdle is funding. The station is estimated at about $60 million. Martin County has earmarked $15 million, while a $45 million federal grant remains pending. That decision is pivotal. Without it, the schedule tightens against a legal milestone from a 2018 settlement that requires Brightline to open at least one Treasure Coast station within 5 years of Miami-Orlando service launching, no later than September 22, 2028. In other words, capital and procurement steps need to move briskly to meet the deadline. The delivery path is straightforward. After Brightline and Martin County signed an agreement in November 2024, the 2025 focus turns to locking in federal and state dollars. With funding in place, late 2025 through 2026 would cover site prep and detailed design across a 4 to 6 acre footprint, a station building, pickup/drop-off areas, and parking for 400 plus vehicles. Main construction would follow in 2026 to 2027. Ticketing, utilities, security systems, platforms, and any auxiliary track work to support station stops, alongside city and county improvements that knit the site to I-95, the Turnpike, and local transit. By late 2027, crews will transition to fit-out, equipment installation, staff training, and testing, targeting an opening in late 2027 or early 2028. Risks remain typical for Florida. Grant timing, construction cost volatility, and hurricane disruptions can all push dates. On opening, Stuart is sized for roughly 1,000 to 1,500 daily passengers, with frequent, reliable service to Miami, West Palm Beach, and Orlando. Facilities would include accessible platforms, self-service ticketing, climate-controlled waiting areas, and integrated local transit links for smooth first and last mile connections. As demand grows, Brightline's plan is to scale capacity with longer consists, and as operations allow additional frequencies, supported by mature safety systems and a service plan that protects dwell times and on-time performance. What about the Space Coast station, and how does it differ from Stuart? Let's recall the basics. Cocoa's proposed Brightline stop sits just north of the city in Brevard County on Florida's Space Coast, within a short reach of Kennedy Space Center and with straightforward access to Port Canaveral, home to millions of cruise passengers each year. The site comprises more than 90 acres, largely controlled by Brightline and the city of Cocoa, which helps reduce right-of-way complications and speeds early design work on the high-speed line's next infill station. On funding, the program totals around $80 million. To date, Brightline and the city have assembled roughly $20 million, including land value and local capital, and the city formally committed an additional $5 million in 2024. That leaves an estimated $47 million gap now being pursued through a federal grant. It's Cocoa's second application after an earlier $47 million request did not advance, an honest setback, but also a sign that the partners are staying the course. The delivery sequence is clear. If federal dollars land on time, the final design would wrap by late 2026, followed by construction and a targeted opening in 2028. As with any Florida project, grant timing and procurement can nudge dates, but the path of work, design, utilities, platforms, fit-out, and testing follows Brightline's proven playbook. The station concept mirrors Boca Raton's modern, convenient model: free Wi-Fi, climate-controlled waiting areas, large parking fields, self-service ticketing, secure gate control, and curbside zones for taxis, shuttles, and ride-hail. The operational highlight remains the same across the corridor: quick boarding and predictable dwell times, without the long queues common at airports, so trains can turn efficiently and keep the schedule simple to memorize. At full build-out, the Space Coast terminal is sized for roughly 1,500 to 2,000 daily boardings, with upside driven by its proximity to Kennedy Space Center and Port Canaveral, one of the world's busiest cruise gateways. Even a small share of cruise travelers using Brightline to reach Orlando or Miami would elevate Cocoa into a major visitor node. On the ground, the station helps relieve highway congestion and supports new activity around the site: hotels, restaurants, transportation services, and retail that grow with the all-day passenger flow. Promise aside, both stations are in a holding pattern, waiting on pivotal approvals that will decide what happens next. Could timelines slip or the projects be shelved? Drop 1 if you think yes, 0 if you think no. Both Treasure Coast and Space Coast remain pre-construction, held up primarily by financing gaps and pending federal approvals. Local interest is real, but assembling a full capital stack has proven difficult. The federal grant process is competitive and slow, adding months to an already tight timeline and keeping both stations on paper rather than in the field. Beyond funding, objective risks are hard to control. Construction and labor costs in Florida have climbed since the pandemic, pushing project budgets beyond early estimates. Weather adds another layer. Hurricanes and seasonal flooding, most common from June through November, can halt work, damage sites, and trigger schedule resets, all of which drive costs higher. The practical takeaway: progress is likely to be measured, not rapid. Delivering these stations will take steady funding and careful risk management over several years. Even so, the payoff is compelling. Stronger regional mobility, new tourism flows, and local economic activity that can build around each terminal once they open. That's a wrap for today. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and train well.